I think there are three main reasons why British businesses ought to think about international expansion. Firstly, there is just a great set of markets out there, much bigger than you will ever be able to access in the UK domestic market. Secondly, I think we should be a bit more confident about the brands and the businesses we have in the UK. I think they've got great things to offer, and there are customers out there around the world that would be interested in discovering, particularly uniquely British approach. So there are things that we generally have got to offer customers around the world. I think the third thing is that if you can build an international business, it gives you both diversity and that greater scale, which if you're trying to develop your business in the longer term, I think it should be a business that can go to multiple places. And we've certainly found at Kingfisher, having a spread of businesses around the world makes the overall business more resilient, and we benefit from the scale. I think when you're thinking about expanding internationally, the most important thing to do is do your homework first. And there is no such thing as going international. You're essentially going to a set of markets. And obviously there are some great bits of advice you can get, notably UKTI and embassies and consulates around the world. And I definitely encourage people to go and go there as their first port of call. But do your homework and essentially understand, I think, really two things. Will your business concept travel into a different country with a different set of economics, different set of competitors? And secondly, what's the best way of putting a toe in the water? How can you find your way of testing something, learning? And increasingly for a lot of businesses now, you can test via the internet without actually having to go there. So if you can do your research and then figure out how to test it without making a huge commitment up front, you can establish a list of countries you can go to. And I think it's probably easier than people think when they sit there and sort of wondering about it for the first time. I think British businesses have got two big advantages when we think about internationalisation. Firstly, it may be a bit obvious, but English is the global language. We already have capabilities. You can actually trade quite successfully around the world using English without having to become completely local. And it sounds obvious, but I really wouldn't underestimate it. It's very different if you're a Spanish company trying to say to come to the UK. But I think the other thing is that we, culturally and historically, have always traded with the whole world. And I think we are more open, we're more flexible, and we're more, I think, attuned to the adaptation that you have to be successful locally. And I think it's been very interesting in retail sector, seeing retailers going around the world, which is not easy. And the British retailers have had great success, I think, because of that cultural openness and flexibility. I think if you're thinking about the UK's unique strengths and the business's unique strengths, I would probably say, look, there are loads of things that people bring to it, but if I had to group them, there are maybe three areas where I think the Brits generally do well. There's one set which is around, I suppose, the sort of heritage, premium quality, playing to the traditional aspect of great British brands, and I think that's there in some of the Great Britain branding that we've seen develop around the world. I think the second bit is that there is a strong heritage and strong grouping of British brands around innovation, specialist firms doing interesting things, and everything from Dyson to Formula One cars, that there is a real legacy of high value added, interesting, innovation led. I think the third thing is slightly different, which is I think there is far more in the way of service capability in the UK than in certain other countries. So I think we are world leaders in particularly things like professional services, and respected because of the cultural background that we have there. Well, Kingfisher is operating now in 9 countries around the world. Most of our profit comes from international markets outside the UK. I would just offer 3 bits of learning again to individuals or businesses thinking about this. Firstly, really do your homework on the countries. You have to have a specific country strategy. It's not good enough to have an international strategy. So prioritize your countries, do your homework, really think about it. Secondly is develop a way of trying to test your way into countries rather than make big one-time commitments. You will almost certainly not get it right perfectly the first time, so you have to have the flexibility to develop and test and learn. And thirdly, I would really pay attention to the quality of management you put on it. This is not something you give to the sort of the last person with an hour left on a Friday to think about it. You've got to invest in decent quality people. And I think learn from the experiences of others. And obviously UKTI and the rest of the government support that's out there has got a huge amount of knowledge and data to share and can put you in touch with people who've gone through a similar experience. I I think when we look around the world and try and work out where the potential is for British business, there are some very different trends there, and I think it will obviously depend again a bit on the sector and the competition you're in. So I don't think there's a sort of one size fits all. But I think I would group it into three main geographic type of opportunities. Firstly is Europe, which actually technically is our biggest trading partner, and there are some advantages of proximity and cultural fit there. And the fact we have got a single market, which makes it somewhat easier than in some of the other markets to operate, even if it's a collection of countries in the EU. I think, although it's seen as mature, I would actually put Europe, for most of our British companies, as the quickest win to get. Second area, and obviously is huge, is the US, and we have again an affinity given the language, but I think it's important to recognise there that the US is different. They may speak English, but it's a very different country, and there's a lot of big competitors there, but I think naturally there is, particularly in certain areas like high tech, there's an obvious affinity. And the third group is the developing countries, including critically China. And I think there are some challenges for companies because some of these markets are not nearly as developed as they are, but the long-term growth opportunities are probably more in those markets than some of the existing areas. And I think I would suggest that you need to think about which one of those you do in what priority, and are there particular reasons that your particular product or services fit better in one market or another. But all three, given their different dynamics, are great opportunities. I think international businesses look at British businesses and British brands and recognise, I think, two strong positives that we bring. Firstly, I think we are trusted as brands in the international community for the way we do business, the integrity, the governance structures we have, and the willingness to be open and transparent. And that is, something of an advantage around the world, which I don't think everyone has. I think secondly, there is a sense that there are some really interesting British businesses doing different things. And so I'm not sure we would be the place to go to for a big commodity purchase of, say, steel, but value-added, interesting businesses, service-led businesses, points of originality, the creative industries. There are lots and lots of areas in which the UK is a world leader, clearly obviously financial services. And really, I think we've got a sector capability and reputation in those areas which we should be justly proud of.